A staple of the main story for every Yakuza or Like a Dragon game is that at some point or another, you will have to do a battle that is rather long. In the community, these are referred to just quite plainly as long battles, but the rough definition is that it's a series of usually uninterrupted encounters with groups of enemies, and that you'd be progressing through a level of some kind. Essentially, the best way to look at a long battle is that the game becomes a traditional beat-em-up, and like any beat-em-up, you're faced with various obstructions where you need to defeat all enemies to advance through them, until you eventually work your way towards a boss fight. It would be a crime if I didn't say that all long battles in any of these games are awesome. They're very cool, a lot of them are very unique, and most importantly, they're very fun. And so in this video, I'm going to look at some of the best ones throughout this series. I'll only pick one from whichever game, but there won't be one from every game, as I'll only look at some of the most impactful, some of the coolest, some of the most unique, and most importantly, some of the most fun long battles these developers have ever cooked up. Obviously, there'll be spoilers ahead, so I'll order the games that appear in this video by a pseudo-release order, so that way you can skip to a game you haven't beaten yet or whatever. And what better way to start the video than to start it with a long battle that I believe set the standard for all future games. The good old final long battle of Yakuza 3. Now, Yakuza 3 is actually one of my favorite games in this series, or well, it would be if it was the only video game to ever exist, but its final long battle was filled with a lot of good ideas that allowed the developers later down the line to just continue building on them. Yakuza 1 and 2 and the PS2 as well as Kenzan had some large areas to progress through, especially Kenzan with many of its very unique environments, but in Yakuza 3, racing through a massive sprawling tower facing constant foes with lots of variety as you progress was really cool. You find plenty of weapons or healing items in the lockers or diverse enemies as you proceed. For example, the chair guys, who if you're like me on my PC save file and you forgot to grab Essence of Self-Destruction, you'll know how annoying they are, but the whole sequence does a good job at feeling like the final battle, especially towards the end. Fighting the different agents, in particular Andre Richardson, all for it to conclude with one of the most exhilarating boss fights the series still has had, was a great way to create something impactful. One downside is of course various mechanics that existed in some of the older games, but the actual biggest downside of this whole section is that QTE against Mine, because you can do it like 7 times and it's the exact same every time, and the mocapping is super weird compared to the very video gamey animations for the rest of the fight, but whatever. Fly is sick, and he's a fun fight. Now, the reason I say it set the standard too is both how you progress and what the premise is. Kenzan, that game I mentioned earlier, was the first PS3 game of the series, so thanks to more advanced hardware, the fights had less loading screens and more open environments. Ascending a tall tower also wasn't a unique aspect because you technically did that already in Yakuza 1 and 2, but just having non-stop action with no bullshit in between did indeed become the standard for how all long battles would behave moving on. And there can be no better an example than the next game's final long battle, and also I'm gonna cheat and combine it with another game too. Yakuza 4's final long battle, which in a rare instance wasn't actually the final section of the game, was Kamurocho Hills. And while it was very different, most of the layout was reused in Yakuza 5's second last long battle. These are both very cool for mostly the same reasons though. Kamurocho Hills was a thing that commenced its existence in Yakuza 2, then after some shit it got box selected and then deleted in Yakuza 3, only for it to return in Yakuza 4 in a massive epic battle where you could run through the not yet completed but still enormous shopping center with all sorts of different shops and designs. The cool thing though is really just how massive it was, and being able to look all the way down to the bottom makes you really have to stop and think something. I've been saying it for years, but seriously RGG Studio, like dead set I am serious, put Kamurocho Hills as an explorable area in the games. Like, you have already designed everything, just plonk some NPCs into it, add some shops, minigames, sub-stories, and enemy encounters, and then boom, you have a massively expanded Kamurocho. Eventually in Yakuza 4, you reach the top and it goes back to its Yakuza 2 appearance where it was just a bunch of scaffolding. But in Yakuza 5, they expanded it quite a bit. Makes sense given that it's been some years, so there's a whole massive front section as well as much more up top. It also provided a unique aspect that 4's couldn't, where you could choose which character to play as between Saejima and Kiryu. Nothing at all changed between them sadly, but still if one character had more upgrades than the other, then you could pick that one. Anyway, just like Yakuza 3, the massive area you traverse with the non-stop action is what makes this a lot of fun, and to top it all off, Solitude from Yakuza 4 is just phenomenal. Then we'll look at Ishin's long battles, of course considering both the original and the remake because they are the exact same game. Now the interesting thing about Ishin is that they're all good. Yeah, that's right, I said it. They're all cool, the story context of all of them is great, especially if you know your history, and unlike the previous games, there's a shitload of different themes tied to them. I can't pick a single one because, legit, they are all super cool, but if you want to hear a sick as hell theme, then have a listen to this one from the final battle. And of course, all of these were really good in the remake too, and they didn't just randomly add the giant dudes to some of them and make them annoying as hell, but whatever, we're moving on. It's time now for perhaps one of the most impactful ones, and it's in one of the most popular. Yakuza 0. Now, Yakuza 0 certainly has some amazing long battles. In fact, it's so chock full of fun and memorable ones, in particular the last two, and they're all filled with only a few themes, but all of them are awesome. However, the one I'll look at is the one that I think is still one of the best ways to introduce a game. It's not right at the start or anything, but after giving you a bit of time to figure things out, the game throws you into a massive and incredibly cool long battle. It's epic for many reasons, but there are some downsides you'd definitely be aware of when looking back on it. For one, you only have Brawler and Rush, and you also don't really get much in the way of upgrades or items considering how early it is. I also think the tutorials in the Yakuza games, especially the old ones, are actually laughably shit because they barely fucking explain anything. And for the millionth time on this channel, everything to do with Yakuza 0's heat mechanic can die in a really deep hole. But still, it's something that I feel hooks in every single player, and you just want to keep on playing to experience something like that again. Now, some of you may be thinking that this would be the part where I'd play Yakuza 0 music. However, it happened a while ago and doesn't seem to happen anymore, but there was a time where Yakuza 0 music got copyright claims on YouTube, so since then, I've not bothered using it. It's fine anyway, the soundtrack, as amazing as it is a bit overdone. I'm not like your average YouTuber because I don't play the same video game songs in every single video, and instead, I like to provide you with different songs that go beyond trends. Oh my, get the fuck! The next one we'll skip is Kiwami 1/Yakuza 1. Yeah, that's right, I said it. Nah, jokes aside, escaping the Tojo clan, fighting through that restaurant in Chinatown, and fighting the big mob in the street are alright. The story context is really forced for a lot of them, and most of them end with a really shit boss fight. Like, the song The Wicked from Kiwami is kinda just ruined by fighting Jingu. But then of course, there's Yakuza 2 and Kiwami 2. Oh boy, there's some cool ones in there. The first one against the Omi is pretty legendary. Fighting the Man in Black is iconic, the castle is ridiculous, the highway one is classic action movie, but it all peaks at the last one. In the original, it was the first one to have a long battle go all throughout Kamurocho. Not that that's all too surprising given it was the second one, but it was also one of the very few to have a long battle that does that. Unfortunately, due to either hardware limitations or just a lack of time/knowledge from the devs, the long battle, so to speak, is interrupted every time you clear a wave of enemies so that it can cut to a loading screen and make you fight the next wave somewhere else. Makes sense because the combat camera would have made it so that either the game chugs as it attempts to load distant things as you navigate through the city, or there would have to have been large voids or fog like a PS1 game. So rather than programming all of that for one fight, they just teleported you until you eventually got to the bottom of Kamurocho Hills and fought a large wave of Jingwon, all for it to conclude with a final battle against the Man in Black. Pretty cool, but unfortunately no unique themes, and the hardware limitations certainly limit the potential of the fight until you get Kiwami 2, baby! Thanks to the almighty powers of sort of knowing how to develop on the hardware you're using, Kiwami 2's long battle is identical in premise, but not even slightly in execution. You run through the southwest corner all the way to the northeast corner of Kamurocho, all the while there's intense battles, split paths, rocket launches, and most importantly, an incredibly energetic and action-packed theme playing in your ears. The cool thing about this fight through Kamurocho is the lack of restriction. Previous Kamurocho long battles do block large parts of the map so that you're restricted to a few streets, but this is very open. And throughout the battle, you can get your hands on all sorts of different weapons, but not the rocket launchers, unfortunately. Would have enjoyed a bit of terrorism, but not today, sadly. Once you get to Kamurocho Hills, the fight is very similar to Yakuza 2's, but once again with another theme, and this one goes absurdly hard. You defeat this large group, and you might be forgiven for expecting the theme to continue as you fight the Man in Black in the elevator, but no, guess what? It's something that could be its own final boss theme. Technically, you could argue that the fight concludes with all the stuff at the very top, but unfortunately, once you smash this dude's face in, it does end there. But honestly, the whole game could have ended there with how awesome it was. Oh, but Kiwami 2 is me. Going back in time now, there was Yakuza 6's final long battle. This was another game that didn't actually have its final long battle be a part of the finale of the game, but that still doesn't deny any of its merit as one of the coolest in the series. You start off with the lads, all in their handsome looking suits as they prepare to storm the tower. You kick lots of ass, and fortunately, thanks to Yakuza 6's horrible audio balancing, you can barely hear the amazing theme over the sounds of your drum when you have enemies screaming. But actually, fortunately, they do the cliche, go on without me, one by one as you progress so that it eventually ends with just Kiryu and a 1v1 against Somiya, who has yet another incomprehensibly brilliant theme. From just a cinematic perspective alone, it's an amazing trip through the refurbished Dragon Engine Millennium Tower that we will see a couple more times in the later games. The lighting looks awesome, there's action around every corner, and you get to kill people in helicopters. There's not much else to say about this battle beyond the fact that it's both cool and fun. After this, we have Judgment, a game with a surprising lack of long battles, and most of which are towards the end of the game. Sadly, the few it has are either short or not that exciting, to be perfectly honest. But fortunately, Lost Judgment had one of the most epic battles ever. That battle is, without a doubt, the very last one of the game. Ironically, Lost Judgment I think might have the least, ignoring the counter files, with one of them just having like 4 groups of enemies and you move 5 meters and then boom, you're done. But this last one more than makes up for that. Starting in the rain against such an immense horde of bad guys, fighting alongside the lads, hearing a remixed theme, which that's something rare for this series because they only ever remix Receive You or songs from like Yakuza 1. Then after that huge fight, you just navigate through this enormous warehouse with all sorts of obstacles you gotta maneuver through and enemies you gotta slam into the concrete. Then there's the theme when you're not engaged in combat, which sounds like it's encouraging you to keep pushing. Then there's Higashi with his forklift certification. Then there's the final battle against RK, which you're like, okay, time to kill Soma, I guess. Well, you guessed wrong. You then go have your final battle against him in the freezer, and the game is super based because it lets you save right before him. But once you beat him, holy shit. It's time for unwavering belief. Let's go. It starts off all epic and grand, and then Kawana's first phase has like literally 1 health bar, but it's fine, because then you go to the kick-ass second phase and hear this. You beat his ass, the game ends, and you get to sit there in the credits looking forward to when they do Judgment 3. Eventually. One day. Maybe. But you know what came out after Lost Judgment? Yeah, that's right. It's Lyco Dragon, Gaiden, and it's the castle, baby. You start off with Soul of the Ogre, and you shatter some skulls. Then you get Two-Face Castle, and it's like, whoa, getting major Persona 5 vibes here. And then you fight Nishitani, and it's just all epic. If you want more detail, you can watch an analysis I made on what Lyco Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, did right, as well as what it did wrong, as a celebration of its 1-year anniversary. Because I don't need to say anything else, it's all just supreme excellence. Now then, unlike the game that came immediately before it, Yakuza Like a Dragon actually had quite an amount of long battles, although instead you could view them as dungeons. In fact, this game was the first one to have a long battle that you can do after beating the game, although of course it's just a stronger version of the final battle of the game. And you know, that final one is the very one I'll talk about. As is the standard practice with RGG Studio, the layout of this one is of course copied from Yakuza 6's, with a small addition at the very end, but even ignoring that, the introduction cutscene of Ichiban looking up at the stormy dragon's tower is super cool. But what's even more cool is that this battle feels like a march towards the dragon's den. I mean, realistically that's what it is, but that thought is backed up by the theme. It adds a lot to the finality of everything. After all these long hours, you've approached the end of this epic journey, and right up at the tippy top is that dragon who also has an amazing theme, but has way too much fucking health. At least it's not a short battle, and it can be quite tough, but seriously, it goes for way too long. Anyway, realistically, Tendo is the final boss, but you do still get 2 battles afterwards, and even still, this game doesn't mess around with giving you a cool conclusion with even more cool music. So the next game I'll mention is Infinite Wealth, the other turn-based game, but before I do, I'm just going to put this thought out to the wind in hopes that they do it one day. In Infinite Wealth, you can move in combat, and in the 2 turn-based games, even in long battles, you are constantly kicking in and out of combat. You know what they should do? When you defeat an enemy group, have the movement radius expand out and have that radius plus the UI fade away, so that now you have complete freedom of movement, but you're still in your job outfit and holding your weapon. Then they can sort of truncate the result screen, and when you get to the next encounter, have the radius fade back in as well as the UI, and then boom, next encounter. Just an idea, RGG. Anyway, Infinite Wealth also has a surprising number of long battles, and this time around they're much more varied, much more in depth, and there's a lot more of them. Personally, I think all of these are a lot of cool fun, but as per usual, it is once again the final one, and conveniently, it's once again in the same reused tower. The difference with this one though, it starts out the front and ends in a massively expanded section of the tower, so this time around, you really do get the full scope for just how massive the Millennium Tower really is. Not to mention that it starts with a sick remix of Receive You that if you don't like, well, I don't like you either. Well, I personally felt that they should have tweaked the story so that all 10 party members were available for this battle and made it a truly overwhelming battle. Still very cool. But what's even more cool is when the boys show up and do a cool ass fight with you. Now, unfortunately, because they're all guest party members, you can't control them, and the AI is programmed to only attack you, but there's no denying how awesome this is. Unfortunately, in the ending sequence, they clearly didn't block out the scene correctly, and so people clip through solid objects. And then they do the cheesiest pose for the camera ever, but the shot does go kinda hard. That theme that kicks in here then sticks with you for the rest of the battle, and good thing it does, because it's a great song. You scale the rest of this enormous monolith, all for it to conclude with a final boss which, where it sucked. How about you suck my dick because the end of Denial is like the best final boss theme ever, and the intro syncs up beautifully with the song, and the fight is fun, so I do not give a fuck. And then that's it for the video. A big thanks to all of you for watching, and an even bigger thanks if you subscribe, because I am very close to hitting 50k subscribers, although it'd be very embarrassing if I hit that number before releasing this video. But regardless, for all of you who have made it this far into the video, I've got a little secret to tell you. There's one game I haven't mentioned at all in this video that has long battles that trumps all else. To those of you who are initiated, you know what I mean. No, it's not Dead Souls. It's actually the best game ever created. It's the one, the only, Final Fantasy XVI!